My name is Robert Bruner. I'm the Dean of the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia. I think video education is okay and useful for basic skills, for presenting a concept, for defining terms, for showing how a system might unfold. But what qualifies for a leading business school education is necessarily the growth not only in basic skills, but also knowledge, that is to say, knowledge that unifies across skills, across environments, and then attributes such as the ability to communicate well, to persuade, to negotiate, to lead. And as you go up the ladder from skills to knowledge to attributes, we've discovered that students benefit much more from face-to-face contact, from interaction with mentors and teachers on a very direct and personal basis. So I think of technology as a complementary resource for great educational institutions. I think it's something we need to absorb. We need to continue to embrace and experiment with, and yet not assume that it is the panacea for our needs. Let me tell you an example, if I may. At the Darden School, we were selected by Amazon.com to be one of 5 institutions who would run a pilot using the Amazon Kindle as a device for downloading case studies and studying them and using them in class. A case study is a document of 5 to 30 or 40 pages in length. It consists of a great deal of text and a number of tables and graphs, etc. We all aspire for the day when we can use electrons rather than molecules of wood or fiber to transmit knowledge, and therefore this seemed like a wonderful experiment. We were the only case study-based institution in this pilot program of Amazon's, and we took one of our 5 sections of the first year of our MBA program students, about 65 students, and gave each of them a Kindle and each of them the right to take the paper version of each case study. And what we discovered over the course of the semester that we ran this exercise was that students really liked the Kindle for documents that were pure text, that merely involved the reading and then reflection on ideas. And these would be materials in the area of human behavior, perhaps some materials in economics and the like, communications. Other subject matters such as finance, accounting, operations, heavily quantitative materials where students are flipping back and forth between text and tables. The students found that those cases were difficult to use on the Kindle. What did we conclude from all of this? We conclude that the Kindle and other digital readers are wonderful supplements for the distribution of electronic material. Darden is the 2nd largest publisher of case materials in the United States, one of the largest, maybe the 2nd in the world, and therefore it's in our own interest to find ways to disseminate our intellectual property digitally. But what matters is not the cost to the school or the convenience for administrators, but what matters is the learning of the students. And if the learning is best promoted through a physical document, then we will deliver our material that way. That's what we're doing this year. But indeed, we're digitizing virtually our entire library. And we expect that a version of the readers and other digital media will eventually make it easy to use our materials that way. I'm the chair of a task force of deans organized by the AACSB that accredits business schools around the world. This task force is focusing on the globalization of management education. Among the findings in our study is a census of institutions that grant degrees in business of one kind or other. And we think of business schools as really numbering 100 or 200 or some small number, but in fact the census reveals that there are over 12,600 institutions worldwide. This is a vast, vast field, of whom perhaps at most 10% of the institutions are accredited, meaning that somebody has, of an independent nature, has come in and looked at the professors, the curriculum, the quality of students, the facilities, and said, this is a credit-worthy institution. Students who apply to and attend this school get a decent education. So as I think of the challenge in the balance of this century, it is simply to raise the bar across the entire field. For indeed, many of these 12,600 institutions are storefronts somewhere in the world, opened by an entrepreneur, perhaps somebody with an MBA from some institution, but somebody who may mean well, but who also finds a profit-making business in teaching students about business. We as a field in management education are still in the early stage of development, though some schools number their years well over 100. Truly, the field has grown rather rapidly in the last 50 years, and there's much to be done yet in the form of advancing quality. Now, the juiciest opportunities will be in several areas. I'll give you three. One is technology, the adoption of learning media that can really raise the game of students near and far. The second is globalization, because truly management and business are no longer merely local, they're national and indeed international, and we need to develop students who are globally ready and globally confident. A third development is the interface between business and government, and education and government. Government will be involved in the fields of business and education much more deeply than in years past. We need to absorb that into our curricula and truly build in our graduates the capacity to function well in that interface between business and government. I think business serves a wonderful social purpose. Obviously, a business career is a wonderful gateway into a better life, and making a better life for yourself is a wonderful dream. And I think it's a very human impulse, a better life than your parents and your grandparents had. But truly, business has an immense social impact that's good in and of itself. For indeed, it's the businesses, predominantly the small businesses, that pay the most taxes, employ the most people, create the most new jobs, create new products and new services, better housing, warmer clothing, better medicine, faster communication, you name it. All of these have enormous social benefits. And I would add that in developing economies, such as India and China, we've documented how millions of families have been lifted out of poverty because of the growth of the private sector. That is social action that's extraordinarily difficult for the public sector to achieve. As for the allocation among subsectors within business, it's very hard to say. Finance versus healthcare versus energy or others. We might wish that we could be czars or czarinas and direct these MBAs into one field or another, but truly talent finds its own level. And it's not clear to me that the graduates who do go into banking or hedge funds stay there indefinitely, and indeed many of them turn outward to run companies, to start up companies, to buy them and rejuvenate them. Net, I think it's ultimately a good thing wherever they head. Much has been made about the reset environment in which we now exist. In the dark days of September 2008, Francois Sarkozy said, this is the death of laissez-faire. Others said it's the end of capitalism. Shortly after Obama's election, Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, said this is an emotional, social, and economic reset. Stephen Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, said much the same. Mohamed El-Erian, the co-CEO of one of the largest investment management companies, calls it the new normal, as if to suggest a step function change downward in our outlook and expectations. This is a very serious meme, I would call it. It's an idea that's spread widely through blogs and social media, certainly through the mainstream media. And I think it's worth scrutinizing very carefully. Quite often, these pundits will point to historical antecedents, such as the Great Depression. They'll say, given our rates of unemployment, this is not unlike the Great Depression, or the Depression of 1893 to 1897, or 1873 to 1875, and so on. And yet, when you examine the antecedents, you see that indeed they're much more severe than what we're living through right now. And if you look at the economics of today, you see some sharp asymmetries. So we know that Detroit is in very dire shape. We know that California is struggling. Some states, some cities, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, is on the verge of bankruptcy. But other cities, Washington, D.C. is actually thriving. New York City is coming back nicely. North Dakota, of all places, is actually growing. Internationally, we have states, countries such as Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland in very tough shape. The United States is growing, has been growing since June 2009, albeit at a slower rate than we would like, a slower rate than necessary to create new jobs. And yet you have India and China that were almost unfazed by the crisis. Germany is rebounding very nicely. So you see these asymmetries around the world. And these are not the conditions of the Great Depression. Yes, we're seeing some beggar thy neighbor behavior on the part of other countries. Yes, we're seeing marches and rallies in Washington, such as we've heard about in the previous depressions, though the unemployment rates aren't as bad. The growth has continued. It's resumed earlier than the resetters might suggest. Net, I view the reset concept with skepticism. But I hasten to add that no one who pays attention to the facts today can deny that a lot of people are in pain, that there are grave struggles within companies and municipalities and states, and that the deep problems the United States faces are going to take years to work out. But this ain't the Great Depression. We've seen buoyant turnarounds in healthcare, energy, even the public sector. The public sector has been hiring throughout this stretch. The defense industries, obviously, with 2 wars on, and the subsidiary industries that feed all of the industries I just mentioned. Technology has remained reasonably robust through this episode. Obviously, the technology that serves consumers and businesses experienced a decline, but it looks like they are on the rebound. Much depends, in all of these cases, on the rate of consumer and business spending and when that'll reopen in serious ways. We should remain very concerned about housing. That's likely to be in a slump for years to come. There's a large overhang of excess capacity both in homes and commercial real estate. Financial services is another exclamation point, a point of concern for us, because it's not clear how the financial regulations passed a few months ago will be actually implemented. The rules are being written right now. Certainly the rules will transform that industry in serious ways, and until that uncertainty is resolved, I don't think we'll see the large banks and other financial institutions expanding in obvious ways. I'd say those are some of the examples of industries. It's hard to know where else the asymmetries will spread. My advice to people anywhere, beginning or resuming a career, women who've been out of the workforce or men for a period of time, retirees who for economic reasons need to return to the workforce, is to first and foremost make career decisions based on what you can learn. And this would suggest gravitating toward those spiky metropolitan areas around the world that attract the best talent. Here in New York City, we have a wonderful crossroads of talent in many, many industries. Other spiky cities would be the Bay Area around San Francisco, California, LA to some extent, Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C., Boston, Massachusetts are all examples. They're very tough markets in which to find work, because younger people willing to work for relatively lower rates of compensation because they're just starting their careers tend to flood the market in those venues. But you got a choice to make. You can accept a somewhat lower rate of compensation and really learn a new business, or you can hold out and hold out and hold out. And sometimes the holding out can be a very poor choice. So first of all, I'd go to the so-called spiky cities. Spiky cities internationally would be London, Shanghai, Singapore, possibly Frankfurt. The point is, you want to go where the talent is going. You have to evaluate an industry to enter the way an investor would consider an industry in which to put his or her hard-earned money. And that means you have to take a look at the outlook, the potential for growth, and the potential for profitability in that industry. Those two are fundamental factors that will drive the employment buoyancy of that industry for years to come. So this would entail thinking about the rate of new product development, of the development of new services, ancillary services, the excitement that consumers ultimately feel for the products and services in that industry, or if it's a so-called B2B industry, an industry that supplies other businesses, to look at the base of intellectual and human capital in that industry. So for instance, Cisco Systems makes telecommunications hardware that is arguably the best in the world today. It is an exciting firm to work for. The Darden School sends graduates into that firm. Certainly, that firm attracts a great deal of interest from MBA students. And they're making a judgment based on the ability of Cisco to continue to grow, to continue to develop new products, because it's growth and new products and services that ultimately create career opportunities within that firm. And or, if you spend some time working for that company, you can be judged to have learned something about that industry and how a great business does what it does. So again, I revert to the advice, go where you can learn the most. That should be your number one criterion. The panic of let me start over again. The panic of 1907 can tell us a lot about the crisis of 2007 to 2009, the so-called subprime crisis. Crises have in common a number of attributes. The first is they are fundamentally psychological phenomena. They're not driven by rational decision-making necessarily. They are driven by fear and somewhat driven by greed. This is a lesson that's perhaps underplayed in the way schools and pundits talk about the financial markets. But the truth is they are extremely potent forces in the world of business, these psychological forces. What is it that drives them? So as I describe, I and my co-author Sean Carr describe in our book The Panic of 1907, a fundamental factor driving such panics is information asymmetries. Some people know things that other people don't. All panics take their root in the fact that information is not well distributed. Most panics are founded in the wake of extraordinary booms. Booms tend to create more complex institutions, tend to draw naive and less sophisticated players into the markets, tend to create wild expectations about the future, all of which color the information people have and the way they process it. And then a jarring event occurs. Typically, it's a failed speculation that brings down a financial institution, and this makes people sit up and say, "Gee, I really didn't know much about that institution, and if I didn't know much about that institution, maybe I should be worried about the rest of them." And hence, a run on a bank begins, on many banks. So we discover that information is a just fundamentally important phenomenon. So I have argued to public policy experts and legislators that transparency is one of the most important antidotes to a crisis. And frankly, it's an antidote that would help to preempt a crisis. If we can simply help the world see what is the health and well-being of financial institutions, if we can be assured that the institutions have plenty of capital, the safety buffer with which to absorb unexpected shocks to the system, all of these things would go a long way toward addressing the likelihood of another crisis. And by the way, it is almost inevitable that there will be more financial crises. We have not had a century without them, and truly one of the deep lessons of 1907, and indeed the subprime crisis, is that fundamentally we ought to retain enough walking around money and rainy day money in our bank accounts of households and businesses and governments so that we too can withstand the unanticipated shocks. I visited China a few weeks ago, and as you drive through Shanghai or Beijing or other cities, you see massive construction projects ongoing, skyscrapers, and when you inquire into their occupancy, you learn that condos in Shanghai are the subject of high speculation. People buying them, holding them for brief periods of time, selling them to make a profit, and that the occupancy rate in these condo buildings and skyscrapers is really not that high. We should all be worried whenever a large economy displays attributes of widespread speculation. The counter-argument to that you hear from the Chinese is that China is in the middle of a remarkable transformation. It's growing at an astonishing rate, approximately 10% a year in real terms. It is transforming itself. This is triggering massive shifts, demographic shifts within the country, from the relatively rural western part of China to the industrialized eastern seaboard, and that this wave of construction is really, so it is said, an anticipation of this demographic shift. Apart from real estate, we do learn of a very active wave of credit creation within China. It was China's response to the crisis is to make credit freely available, much as the other leading economies in the world did. And in China's case, the financial institutions there have strong ties to the state, to the party. One might wonder about the direction in which loans were made and the soundness of those loans, and indeed the soundness of the institutions. One hears rumors about banks whose portfolios are not adequately marked down for declining credit quality and the like. This is a condition known as zombie banks. I won't speculate on how widespread this problem might be, but I heard about this in a sufficient number of conversations as to suggest that it's a concern there. China's economy has a large number of state-owned enterprises. The management of such enterprises is often guided by a variety of considerations, not merely creating economic value, but also promoting employment in a given city or region, perhaps serving the interests of certain political decision makers and the like. The issue for China in the long run is this. It will become the largest economy in the world reasonably soon. The estimates I've seen suggest as early as 2020, so 10 years from now. And there was a great celebration this summer when China surpassed Japan to become the second largest economy in the world. So the Chinese feel quite proud of this development in their country, and truly it is amazing. China's come very, very far, very fast. But one of the deep lessons of a good business school education is that bigger is not better. Better is better. And by better, we teach that it is competitiveness, it's productivity, it is efficiency, it's GDP per capita, for instance, in national terms. And for China to truly emerge to be the most productive economy in the world, it seems likely that China will need to liberalize its economy, shed the dependence and indeed the reliance on state-owned enterprises and state-directed banks. And this is going to demand a great deal of the Communist Party. Will China make that transition? They must, in short. When that's going to occur is anybody's guess. And truly, what we observe from other robust emerging economies is that the wealth created in those growing economies creates a growing middle class, and with the growing satisfaction of basic needs tends to come a desire for more voice in one's community and one's country. So China will ultimately experience the pressure to develop opposition parties and a free press. I can only urge them on to do so, though how fast and when is a matter for the Chinese to settle. There are two ways that one can think about leadership. Leadership in the form of attributes, i.e., a leader is, and then leadership in the form of actions, i.e., a leader does. And this occupies scholars and CEOs of organizations at great length. But the way we think about it, the way I choose to think about it, is that a leader is someone who can envision developments in the world around. A leader has heightened social awareness in the macro and the micro and even the nano. A leader is highly sensitive to one's own reactions to the world. A leader communicates extraordinarily well. A leader has virtue. A leader manages with integrity and indeed builds trust. A leader enlists others well. And ultimately, a leader has bias for action. Leaders simply aren't satisfied with talking and analyzing. They want to get on to fix things, make things better. So what we see in the world today that's different from 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago are a few factors that are necessarily driving changes in leadership and the attributes that businesses and business schools need to care about. Certainly the first attribute is, the first force of change is technology. Our employees, our students can find out what one another think through the use of cell phones and text messaging and the like. We can't wait to take action. We have to respond very quickly. There are numerous examples of how buzz spreads on the internet, and we need to pay attention to what that buzz is, both publicly as well as within our own organizations, and we need to be prepared to act. So it's not a matter of hearing about an issue or a problem and then convening a task force next week and getting a report in 6 months. Action has to be foreshortened. Action has to take place very soon. A second big force of change would certainly be the demographic shifts that we're witnessing presently. Of course, populations have shifted over the millennia, but in the past 10 years, here in the United States, we've witnessed waves of immigration, shifts from one region of the country to another, shifts even among metropolitan areas. Certainly, we've witnessed the rise of the new generation, the so-called millennial generation, which the consumer survey researchers do suggest has a different take on things and a different way of looking at the world. The issue is that one size doesn't fit all, and indeed, the changing sizes, compounded by technology, need to be attended to in greater care than ever before. It isn't simply a matter of taking out your father's or your mother's leadership playbook and repeating those lessons. We need to adapt. So there will be different language. There will be a different time scale. Though some things need to remain the same, certainly a commitment to deep values, a commitment to integrity and care and concern for one's social circle. This is a terrific time to be an entrepreneur. Absolutely fantastic, because entrepreneurs succeed when the rules of the game are changing. And surely the rules of the game in so many fields and industries are changing right now as a result of the recent financial crisis. Entrepreneurs thrive in a moment of uncertainty and relative instability. Entrepreneurs exploit the changing rules. I do believe that we are on in the early stages of what might be characterized as the third great industrial revolution in world history. The first one sprang out of the invention of steam power and the steam engine. The second one out of electromotive power and electricity. And this third wave that I witness is stemming out of computing power and digital communication technology, combined with globalization, liberalization of trade, and these big demographic shifts, immigration and the like. All of these will create extraordinary business opportunities that I believe will take the better part of this current century to play themselves out. What better time to embark on a business career, indeed to try to launch a business, than right now? This is like catching a wave, as surfers would say, where you can ride the crest of the wave for quite a ways to come. There will be choppy water, there will be uncertainties, there will be moments of great distress, but for the next 50 years at least, anybody in his or her 20s plus can look forward to an extraordinary run in the economy, the current conditions notwithstanding. So what does it take to become an entrepreneur? The steps to get there would be certainly to develop a concept for a product or a service. Second, to talk to people about that concept. Now, this is a little dicey because concepts are often stolen or imitated easily, so you want to be very careful about whom you turn to for advice. But very frequently, the budding entrepreneur will gain financial support from family and friends to build a prototype, to find the first customer, to write a business plan, and with those developments perhaps, to go to a venture capitalist, to raise some serious money with which to hire staff and build out the business. With venture capital money, typically that comes in waves. You raise 2, 3, 4 rounds of venture capital money, and perhaps by that time you're on your feet and self-sustaining and generating enough cash internally to carry your business forward. Or might be possible you'd take your company public and raise money on a stock exchange, or conceivably sell your company to a large corporation that could fund the growth of your company indefinitely into the future. Those are the very broad strokes of steps to become an entrepreneur and a successful one. But you should know that most entrepreneurs fail. Some astonishing figure like 70% of all new businesses fail within a short span of time, 2 or 3 years. And the chief reason is not that the entrepreneurs didn't have desire or didn't have a good idea or couldn't find a willing circle of customers, but that the company simply ran out of money. So the best thing you can do is to try to lock in place the resources necessary to sustain you through the startup phase, which is an extraordinarily risky moment. Now, given those odds of failure, the best entrepreneurs tend to be people who have a stomach for risk. When you think about what it takes to become an entrepreneur, it takes guts. Secondly, it takes a certain amount of smarts and savvy, the capacity to recognize that a market opportunity exists, the capacity to listen to people. Too many would-be entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, have a bright idea and will not pay attention to what people tell them. They will not incorporate what they've learned. They aren't learners. They aren't adaptable. They're simply wedded to some dream they had, and it's conceivable that that dream will hit the big time, but the odds are really stacked against the entrepreneur who won't listen and learn. Finally, entrepreneurs are inspiring people. They may be driven, they may be demanding, but they're sufficiently capable to draw others into their circle that they can really create the nucleus of an organization that ultimately succeeds. All of these attributes are attributes we develop at the Darden School. Certainly the best business schools pay attention to carrying these attributes forward. If you view yourself as starting a lifetime of entrepreneurship, if you view yourself as starting the lifetime of entrepreneurship, you might consider giving yourself the gift of a brief episode of learning, either an episode of working side by side with a truly great entrepreneur, or going to a business school that has a great entrepreneurship program with an incubator and great courses, and that can help put you into a network of other entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. All of those are ways to help narrow the range of uncertainty, the risk of failure. But if you decide to embark on that path, you necessarily face an exciting future, and you have to be prepared for that excitement.